Good evening, George Will here. Breaking news tonight, the public record surrounding Meghan Markle's former inner circle has tightened, not loosened, and the name at the center of it is Jessica Mulroney, the stylist, broadcaster spouse, wedding insider, and once indispensable confidant, whose connection to the Duchess of Sussex now exists in a haze of conflicting public claims, exposed private messages, and very modern reputational risk. On January 28, 2026, people reported that Ben Mulroney said the matter was Jess's story to tell, and that, from what he understood, Meghan and Jessica were on positive terms. Less than 2 weeks later, on February 9, 2026, OK magazine, citing Rob Shooter's Substack and unnamed insiders, reported that Jessica had allegedly been offered $1 million for a tell-all memoir about Meghan. That is the contradiction. Publicly, one camp implies civility. Commercially, another market is already pricing disclosure. And once a friendship reaches the point where a published outlet can plausibly float a seven-figure book figure, the story is no longer about sentiment. It is about leverage, narrative ownership, and the value of silence in an industry that monetizes access. The reason this analysis deserves attention is not rumor, but documentation. First, there is contemporaneous reporting from Entertainment Tonight, dated June 19, 2020, stating that Meghan had distanced herself from Jessica because the comments were unacceptable and offensive, while also noting that reports she had completely cut her off were an exaggeration. Second, there are the private messages themselves, or at minimum the screenshots publicly described by multiple outlets, including the now infamous direct message published after Sasha Exeter said Mulroney threatened her with a liable sick suit. Good luck. Third, there is measurable institutional fallout. CTV removed I Do, Redo from Bell Media platforms effective immediately. Good Morning America said she would no longer appear on the program, and subsequent reporting tied the scandal to losses involving Hudson's Bay and the Shoebox Project. Fourth, there is a long public friendship trail stretching from Toronto in 2011 through the May 19, 2018 royal wedding at St. George's Chapel. Fifth, there is the 2025-2026 aftershock cycle, marital separation news, retrospective pieces, and renewed speculation over who still has receipts and who still has something to lose. That is 5 independent lanes of verification before anyone even reaches the analysis. And before this goes further, those who value evidence over spin should subscribe now, because this case is a perfect example of how reputations collapse not in one dramatic instant, but through a sequence of documented fractures. The mainstream entertainment cycle often reports in fragments rather than as a whole. The evidence itself falls into 6 categories, and each matters. The first is proximity evidence. Jessica Mulroney was not a marginal acquaintance. Us Weekly's timeline places the relationship in Toronto in 2011, follows it through shared travel in February 2016, shelter and support during the September 2017 Invictus Games, and a central role in the royal wedding in May 2018 when her children were in the bridal party and she was widely treated as Meghan's unofficial maid of honor. That level of access matters because proximity creates both trust and memory. The second category is controversy evidence, and here the record becomes much less flattering. On June 11, 2020, Page 6 reported Sasha Exeter's account that Mulroney took offense to a broad Black Lives Matter call to action, contacted brands, and triggered what Exeter described as threatening conduct. Crucially, the dispute did not stay at the level of vague accusation. It moved into written communications. When Exeter later shared the direct message reading, liable, sick, suit, good luck, the story ceased to be abstract and became evidentiary. A private message, once exposed, is no longer merely private. It becomes a fixed exhibit in the court of public opinion. The third category is institutional response. On June 12, 2020, people reported that Good Morning America would no longer use Mulroney as a fashion contributor. The same reporting cited Bell Media and CTV, stating that I Do, Redo had been removed from all Bell Media channels and platforms effective immediately. That phrase matters. Effective immediately is not a slow review. It is a reputational fire door slamming shut. At that point, the issue was no longer whether the private messages looked bad. It was whether major institutions believed they could afford to be associated with them. The fourth category is friendship fracture evidence. ET's June 19, 2020 report is critical because it frames the Meghan side of the equation. A source said the Duchess had distanced herself, that the comments were unacceptable and offensive, and that friends had been concerned Jessica was profiting from her relationship with Meghan to build her own brand. That is not a minor social quarrel. That is a reputational separation justified on both ethical and commercial grounds. The fifth category is retaliatory narrative evidence. On July 11, 2020, page 6 reported that Mulroney was allegedly contemplating a tell-all book and tied that speculation directly to the fallout from the Exeter scandal, the reported collapse of the friendship, and the loss of professional income streams. Whether or not the book was truly imminent at that stage is less important than the pattern. Once private access and public estrangement intersect, memoir economics appear. The sixth and final category is contradiction in the present tense. In August 2025, She Knows framed the friendship as effectively over and described Mulroney as revisiting the fallout 5 years later. Then in January 2026, Ben Mulroney suggested positive terms. Then in February 2026, OK, magazine revived the seven-figure memoir angle. That is comparative escalation. 5 years after the rupture, the story is not cooling, it is being repackaged. Now consider the chronology because timelines remove the luxury of selective memory. First, 2011, Meghan and Jessica connect in Toronto while Suits is filming. Second, 2013, Meghan launches the TIG as Jessica's influence on fashion and presentation becomes visible. Third, February 2016, public social media posts document travel and closeness. Fourth, September 2017, during the Invictus Games in Toronto, Jessica and Ben reportedly provide Meghan a safe place to stay. Fifth, November 2017, footage later shown on Netflix captures Meghan calling Jess as Prince Harry's proposal is underway. Sixth, May 19, 2018, Jessica's children appear in the bridal party at St. George's Chapel. 7th, February 2019, Jessica is part of the New York baby shower orbit. 8th, August 2019, she publicly defends Meghan against racist criticism. 9th, June 11, 2020, the Exeter video and the liable sick suit good luck message hit the public domain. 10th, June 12, 2020, CTV removes I Do, Redo, and ABC confirms Mulroney will no longer appear on Good Morning America. 11th, June 19, 2020, ET reports Meghan has distanced herself. 12th, September 2020, Jessica posts that Meghan is family and is checked up on her every day, a statement later deleted according to People's 2286 recap. 13th, March 2021, public gestures suggest intermittent support or at least ambiguity. 14th, June 2021, cryptic social reposting fuels new speculation. 15th, December 2022, Harry and Meghan revives the historical intimacy with old footage. 16th August 2025, She Knows says the friendship had ended 5 years earlier and that Mulroney was revisiting the fallout. 17th January 28, 2026, Ben Mulroney says they are on positive terms. 18th February 9, 2026, the reported $1 million memoir offer enters the chat. Notice the repetition here. Proximity, controversy, public distancing, partial denial, then monetized retrospection. That is not one misunderstanding. It is a recurring cycle in which private access repeatedly threatens to become public inventory. The legal consequences are narrower than the internet suggests, but they are real. No public criminal case is on record against Meghan or Jessica arising from this fallout, and that distinction matters. Still, if private accusations become published allegations, the law is not vague. California Civil Code Section 45 defines libel as a false and unprivileged publication in fixed form that exposes a person to hatred, contempt, ridicule, or occupational injury. The UK's Defamation Act 2013 Section 1 says a statement is not defamatory unless publication has caused or is likely to cause serious harm to reputation. Canada's Criminal Code Section 298 defines defamatory libel as published matter likely to injure reputation by exposing a person to hatred, contempt, or ridicule, though criminal libel is rarely the path chosen in modern celebrity disputes. And Ontario's Libel and Slander Act remains part of the statutory backdrop for civil claims tied to publication in that jurisdiction. In plain English, if somebody has receipts, those receipts had better be authentic. If somebody has grievances, those grievances had better be framed with precision. And if somebody thinks a cryptic post is safer than a direct accusation, that assumption can vanish the moment implication becomes identification. From here, four scenarios present themselves. Scenario one is managed silence. No memoir, no named accusations, no direct relitigation, only occasional denials and careful distance. That is the least dramatic and probably the safest. Scenario two is controlled disclosure. Selected anecdotes, perhaps through intermediaries, enough to shape perception without inviting a full legal confrontation. That is common, lucrative, and dangerous. Scenario three is commercial escalation, a memoir, documentary interview, or serialized press campaign sold on the promise that the former friend saw everything. If that happens, every sentence will be weighed not just for drama, but for demonstrable proof, because the difference between revelation and liability is one document. Scenario four is quiet reconciliation of interests without emotional reconciliation at all. No warm friendship restored, but a tacit detente in which both sides conclude that mutual destruction serves no one. Based on the pattern so far, scenario two looks the most plausible in the medium term because the market clearly values disclosure while the principals equally value plausible deniability. And that is why this matters tonight. The story is not merely whether Meghan's close friend cut ties. The public record suggests that the fracture happened years ago. The real story is that the exposed private messages never stopped casting a shadow, and now a fresh round of conflicting narratives is testing whether old loyalties will remain archived or become assets. Those who want the next chapter before the headlines sanitize it should subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay close. And for the comment section, one question. If a former insider is offered seven figures, does silence hold, or does the market always win? Type silence if this ends in restraint. Memoir if disclosure is inevitable. Truce if both sides quietly stand down. Or lawsuit if publication crosses the line. Because the next investigation may not be about the friendship at all. It may be about who, in that wider Sussex era circle, still has documents, still has messages, and still has a price.